social media firm Twitter is seeking high-level discussions with the Nigerian government after the platform's operations were suspended in the country. The Minister of Information and Culture, Mohammed, says Twitter reached out to the government on Wednesday morning to find ways of resolving the issue. Mohammed insists Twitter was suspended because it was provided an avenue for people that are threatening the existence of Nigeria.
Decision to suspend Twitter has been lauded by some. It has been decried by some. But we want to make it clear that what is important to us is the sovereignty of Nigeria. And until when Twitter responds, and the cardinal thing is that Twitter must be registered in Nigeria, Twitter must be licensed in Nigeria, and Twitter must stop using its platform for activities that are inimical to the growth of Nigeria or to its corporate existence.
All right, Rufai. So the minister has said that, Twitter, the shutdown has been decried by some, and mostly because of the clampdown on the freedom of speech. He also says that, if we wanted to express ourselves, we could go to like Facebook or WhatsApp, and that avenue is still open for people to chat and talk and discuss. So, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I also think that one of the main reasons might be the fact that Twitter opened its headquarters in Ghana. Remember, he's also talking about the fact that Twitter has to license its operations here, also to register as well, and that they are making a lot of money, which they are not even paying back in taxes to the Nigerian government. So, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I'd say finally, the minister has been able to confirm that they are talking to Twitter, or Twitter has reached out.
Yes.
We'll start from there. The conversation forward is, how do we do it? How do we ensure that free speech is not stifled in this country? And how do we ensure that the rights of people are protected? Those are the big conversation. We can make the long-winded argument about taxes, about the likes and things all over the world, but the truth has to be told that the social media space has come to stay. And it's not only today. It's been there for every part of the world. Some people are alluding to Donald Trump sponsoring this. He's just doing that or getting happy about it. He's just doing that because Twitter slammed him big time and he's been suspended from their platform. So the question is, what are those conversations we should have now? It is all obvious now that they are talking to us. Do we even have a roadmap for social media? And in having this roadmap, we must not stifle the free speech of people. People have a right to talk in a democracy. That's why it's a democracy. And a lot of Nigerians that are making comparison between what is happening here and in America, what Cambridge Analytica did is different. Let's call a spade a spade. Cambridge Analytica was a particular project to manipulate the American voters with data they had, and it was putting out targeted messages. This here is Twitter defending its community space. So let's not muddle up issues, because I hear a lot of analysts since yesterday, they're saying, oh, that was the way America had to clamp down after Facebook Cambridge Analytica case. That's entirely different.
Yes.
If you're saying you want to license them, so what's the way forward? But as long as this does not impinge on people's free speech, you want to get more in taxes from Twitter. How do you have that conversation? You put some things forward. Currently, the G7 is talking about 15% tax all over the world. Twitter is in the UK. Well, how much do they pay the British people in taxes? 1.2 million pounds. They pay the bulk of their taxes to the Irish, over 60 million. Why? Because the Irish have a better deal. So if we want Twitter to pay taxes in this country, we need to have a conversation.
Yes.
It's not by shutting down the business in the first place and shutting down people's right to speak. So if you want Twitter as a revenue stream and social media as a revenue stream, then have a conversation. But also, you two must do some things to create an enabling environment. Like, take, for instance, do we have a proper broadband infrastructure in this Gulf country? Governments in other parts of the world invest in broadband infrastructure. Joe Biden, most of the money he's putting into the American economy now is to invest in broadband infrastructure. So if you want taxes from Twitter, we have to deepen broadband infrastructure too. We have to deepen other forms of investment before you start to get taxes out. I mean, those are conversations I can't negate on the table. If the minister says he wants taxes, but we have to talk both parties. Because for business to be able to pay taxes to you, they too must grow. Not by stifling the business, not by stifling the potential, and making the argument that they're making money and taking it away. We should keep asking ourselves, why did Twitter go to Ghana in the first place?
That's another question.
The president had conversations with Twitter. He courted Twitter. You see, bringing a big multinational to come to your country for business is just like dating a woman. You have to court her. You have to pamper her. You have to tell her that this is my plan. This is what I have for you. So we need to now start courting those big corporations.
Yes.
But it's not by this slam approach.
All right, let's bring in Dr. Abati and Tundu into this conversation. Dr. Abati, it's great that the Nigerian government has open conversation with Twitter now. What are your thoughts?
I don't know how much time we have, to comment on that, since Rufai seems to have taken such a long space. But first, let me apologize to our viewers for the technical hitch that we have and the delay that you may seem to be observing is because this program, we have had to split it between the Lagos studio and the Abuja studio. We apologize, but we'll do our very best to fix it. Now, to come back to you, Ojiokwe, I think there are some takeaways from what has happened between the Nigerian government and Twitter and what is happening. The first point is for us to realize that Twitter is first and foremost a business. And it's a business that has a lot of leverage, that has a lot of influence, and that has its own community rules. This is at the heart of it. Those community rules were infringed upon, allegedly, and on the basis of that, Twitter said it has, enforced its own community rules. The second point is that it's good to see that both sides are now talking. Yesterday on this program, we made the point that this should not be about ego conflict. It should not be a Nigeria versus Twitter, and that there should be room for conversation. That has happened now, according to the Minister of Information. So diplomacy on the part of Twitter, and then, of course, the Nigerian government also now has an opportunity to save its own face, whatever the issues may be. 3, with regard to freedom of expression, the Minister of Information has made it very clear that there are other platforms that are available to Nigerians. There is WhatsApp, there is Facebook, according to him. There are other platforms that can be used. Well, the question is, if you restrict access to any platform at all, whether it's print or broadcast or electronic, that in itself will be considered an infringement on the people's rights. The fourth point is a point that everyone has made about the legality or constitutionality or otherwise of the matter. But as we said yesterday, we hope that this will be resolved and it will be put behind us. We're being told that Twitter must register in Nigeria, it must pay tax, it must also abide by certain other conditions that the Nigerian government is going to give. Well, one of the things we should consider first and foremost is the freedom of the people to access these platforms. 2, the geolocation, because Twitter is in the e-world, is in the e-space. And one of the major takeaways is that, look, there is no way we can wish the social media away. And government itself in that regard must learn to accommodate, to be more open to criticism. But I believe that when this is resolved, the appropriate lessons will have been learned on both sides and on other sides too as well.
Well, for me, what's emerging is the call for regularization of social media vis-a-vis violation of human rights. And that call for regularization is a global one. You'll recall that in the UK, Ofcom was given powers to police social media, but that was more towards violations such as terrorism, child abuse, and violence. What we don't want to see is the China model, unfortunately, where you have outright bans of certain social media giants, and the social media that is permitted is combed through thoroughly for anything that's deemed politically sensitive, which is immediately blocked. In Nigeria, we have fought for and won. People have died for democracy and the right of Nigerians to freely express themselves, as is recognized by our Constitution. This is the thorny issue here.
Well, Tundu, looks like we have to take a short break now.
Right. We'll take a short break, but do stay with us. We'll be right back with everything you need to know. Stay with us. Thank you. Welcome back. You're watching a special edition of The Morning Show. Time for an African business update now. Here's Rotas Odiri.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, OG. Look, we're still continuing the Twitter conversation here. And with respect to Lai Mohammed's comments about exactly how much, we said that Twitter makes about, billions in Nigeria and doesn't pay taxes. So I really wanted us to, and I hope we'll be able to see some of our figures here on exactly how much money Twitter makes with respect to what is expected to be gotten from them in terms of taxes, because it seems like this is something that might be overstated. So first of all, I want us to take a look at Twitter's revenue. Let's take a look at Twitter's revenue and put that up on our screen here. If you look at the amount of revenue that Twitter has made, their annual revenue, their IPO was in 2013. They went public in 2013, and they've been reporting their revenues every year since then. $3.7 billion is the figure that you want to look at the bottom of your screen. That's how much revenue Twitter brought in 2020. Let's look at the next item here in terms of segment revenue. If you look at segment revenue for Twitter, as far as segment revenue is concerned, you can see that, advertising is the bulk of it, right? So you can see that advertising, 3.2 billion in 2020 is what they brought in. Data licensing and other items, that's $500 million there. But 3.2 billion, that's how much they bring in advertising. Next up, region. This is actually what I wanted us to take a look at. As far as the regional revenue for Twitter, you will notice that the United States takes up 55% of the revenue that Twitter brought in. $2 billion in 2020. The rest of the world was 1.6 billion. Now, revenue is top line. What about profits? What about profit? Actually, I think we should look at annual users next before we look at profits. Let's talk about the next figures are. Okay, this is profit. Thank you. Profits. If you look, let's go back to the profit figures before we get to the annual users. If you look at the profit since Twitter, let's go, yeah, there we go. Let's stay here. Since Twitter went public in 2013, they have not made a profit. They've only made a profit in 2 years out of the 8 that they've been operational. If you look in the parentheses, the bracket shows a loss. They made a loss in 2012 of $79 million, loss in 2013, losses. It wasn't until 2018 that they made a profit. This is bottom line profit of $1.2 billion. 2019, they made another profit of 1.4. But in 2020, they made a loss of $1.1 billion. So again, this, if you think about Amazon, you think about Tesla, you think about a lot of these tech companies, they are loss-making, right? So just for everybody knows, just so that we are clear here, Twitter has made a profit of only 2 out of the 8 years it has been operational. Now, annual users, let's just take a look at the next stop in terms of annual users. You will see that I think we have about 186 million, but look at the notes at the bottom of the screen there. Twitter tracks average monetizable daily active users, MDAUs, which only includes daily active users it can monetize, it can advertise to. As far as monthly active users, yeah, 350 to 400 million, but how many of those are monetizable? So when people throw figures at you and say there are 40 million users in Nigeria, and are very important, how many of those 40 million users are monetizable? I went to their financials, look at their MDAUs. Let's look at the next slide here. As far as monetizable MDAUs for Twitter, this is key. Look at the USA, only 37 million are monetizable. 19%. As for the international, it's 81%. So the 19% of Twitter's 55% revenue, or rather 55% of Twitter's revenue comes from only 19% of monetizable users from the United States. The gist of this here is that the United States is where Twitter's revenue comes from. That's where they rake the rest of their money. They haven't given us a breakdown of the rest of the regions, but I have to imagine that India, Russia, Europe, or South Africa all have to come way ahead of Nigeria. So, and then finally, let's look at competition in terms of where Twitter ranks compared to other social media platforms. We should have a graph. Twitter is, look at them, they are all the way at the bottom right in terms of total users. Look at Facebook in first place, WhatsApp, WeChat in China, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Reddit, Snapchat. So I really hope that the federal government puts all of this into context with respect to exactly how much money this company makes. Because when Lai Mohammed says they make billions and we're not making any taxes, was he talking about billions in naira or billions in dollars? Was he talking about billions in revenue or billions in profit? Twitter is a loss-making company, and most of their money that they make in top-line revenue comes from the United States. So we might need to see a breakdown in order to get further what they get from Nigeria, if anything.
It's very interesting figures you have put out there. But you know, yesterday I was referring to market capitalization of Twitter, and I must have given the impression that market capitalization of Twitter, you know, was over $58.8 billion. Now you come this morning, you say, well, Twitter is actually not making any profits, and it has issues with revenue. Can you help reconcile the two in terms of market capitalization and the data you have provided this morning, considering the fact that I was saying yesterday that in fact the market capitalization of the stock market of Nigeria is not even up to that of Twitter? And then in real terms, how does Nigeria, you know, address the issue of geolocation? It's not enough to just set up an office in Nigeria in relation to tax, because we're dealing with, you know, the virtual space.
Yeah, so look, the market cap, I think if you are referring to the market cap over in the United States, yeah, that's on the NASDAQ. They trade on the NASDAQ, which is where all the tech firms trade. But that's market cap is basically the total number of stocks you have multiplied by your stock price. So that's your market cap. So the thing is, though, that in terms of users and how much monetizing they're actually able to do, it is either the federal government of Nigeria is overstating that figure, or they don't know what it really is. So as far as whatever taxes that they're hoping to get from Twitter, they need to look at those numbers and understand that this is not a company that is that has been profit making since its existence. It takes quite a while to gain traction, to get ahead of the Facebooks and Instagrams and other competition around the world before you make money. And then most of their money comes from the United States. So you shouldn't expect that by having them register here, having them pay taxes and give back to Nigeria, what do you expect to get from them? It is the monetizable users that you have to look at. And to your point about geolocation, yeah, it's very important because it's a virtual company. You are essentially, I believe that they are overstating this case with respect to them trying to make sure they have a presence here, work on guidelines and so on and so forth. From a profit tax-paying vantage point, Twitter doesn't make as much money as people think they do.
All right, thank you.
I get Tundu, I get the point that you can have very high market capitalization and still be a loss-making business. That's the point?
Yes.
Okay.
Indonesia last year required Twitter, Zoom, and other internet companies, the tech companies, to start paying 10% VAT on sales. Your thoughts?
That's it from, if I heard you correctly, that's from Europe, yeah? Europe, the EU, this is what's going on now with the global minimum tax. That's why Biden is in Cornwall right now to discuss these issues. Global minimum tax, rather the digital taxes, sorry, that Tundu just mentioned. France is the one that has put it forward. They are still deliberating with the United States. The United States retaliated and said that they will charge, I think, 25% tariffs on up to $2 billion worth of goods coming from the EU if they go forward with those digital taxes. So the big tech, and really France is looking at Google, they're looking at Amazon, they're looking at Facebook, they're looking at the big giants. Twitter isn't really in that conversation as far as the revenue threshold is concerned for those digital taxes. But it's a conversation the United States is hoping to sort out with respect to the G7 meetings that they're having today.
Actually refers specifically to Indonesia.
All right. Thank you so much for that insight, Rotus. Thank you so much, as always. We'll stay with business, and we'll get to a global business perspective with Michael Wilson. He joins us from London. Michael?
Yeah, good morning. I've been tilted very very brief, so I will. There only are three main stories, basically. But for what it's worth, I'll give you what the Asia Pacific markets are doing. And as you can appreciate, everything really just waiting for those US inflation figures, which we will get around about lunchtime today. China stocks basically slightly up, given that apparently there was a constructive phone call between US and China officials. But again, I'd hold fire on that until we actually get those figures. As far as the United States is concerned, domestically, whilst Biden is actually landed in Cornwall as we speak, in the southwest of this country, representatives in the United States, Republicans in the United States, are saying that pushing up some very, very strong opposition to his spending plans. As far as the inflation numbers, therefore, are concerned, in the United States, rough rule of thumb, 0.5% month on month, all okay. 0.8% month on month, sell everything, put on the tin hats, get under the table. That's what the markets are actually saying today. European Central Bank also meets today. Now, it's faced with the prospect of having to talk down the recent rise in long-term bond yields across the bloc, simply because it's trying to keep a cap on, well, there isn't any inflation, but certainly on the deflation that's happening, and how long really they're going to keep pumping money into the various economies of the 27 members of the EU. The economic outlook of the EU, very, very tricky indeed. So we're going to get a very, very cautious outlook. Let's talk very briefly then about the G7. And what we're promised there is a public reiteration of something called the Atlantic Charter, which is basically something that was invented at the end of the Second World War to bring the two companies together. Will they talk about trade? Yes, they will. Will Biden suddenly adopt everything Irish and start talking about Northern Ireland? Yes, he will. Will the Chinese actually object to all this? Yes, they will. Does G7 absolutely represent anything these days? Probably doesn't. That's why South Africa and India have also been invited. The UK is still facing a lot of criticism from UK travel bosses who are saying that routes are not being opened up quickly enough to save the tourist summer. Something, despite what the US and the UK will say today, maybe or towards the end of the G7 about travel routes between the two countries, that'll be something which US and UK travel business people will be talking about a lot. And very, very briefly, oil retreating very, very slowly, but long covering still staying on the gold market. So basically, the only game in town is inflation. Month on month, 0.5%, okay. Month on month, 0.8%, take cover.
The meeting between Lord Frost and the Vice President of the EU, representing the EU in the talks, more or less, didn't record any breakthrough, even if we were told by David Frost that there was no breakdown either. Do you think that there is any hope that this will be resolved before June 30, when the restrictions on chilled meats will take effect? I know that the Prime Minister is very optimistic. He says a deal will be worked out before June 30. But there's the other issue about the UK resorting to a unilateral extension of that June 30 deadline. And on the other hand, you have President Joe Biden, complaining about the role of the UK in that conversation. What do you think is likely to happen, particularly now that the US is saying that the Good Friday Agreement may be affected?
What tends to happen at G7s is that the officials have already decided what's going to be announced in the final communique. So whatever discussions you think are taking place actually have taken place and will also take place unilaterally, or rather bilaterally, after the G7 is over at the end of the weekend. As far as US and UK trade is concerned and travel, amazingly confusing still. There are spikes of COVID in this country, spikes of COVID in the United States, and certainly in the rest of the world. And until brave politicians start to say this is the risk that we're going to have to take, I think that anything to do in terms of travel is going to be still very confusing. As far as trade's concerned, I still maintain I know that lots of noises are being made about this right now. I'm still not exactly sure how far that is in Joe Biden's in tray or on his to-do list, because when he gets back to the United States, I said right at the beginning of all this, there is still enormous opposition to his infrastructure plan. Those are the kind of domestic pressures that he's actually facing. World leaders are very good, as we say in the trade, about playing away when they've got problems at home. But as soon as they get back, those problems will start to engulf. I think there'll be a very, very rocky administrative road towards that infrastructure plan being approved. And I think that trade there'll be noises about it, there'll be phone calls and all the rest of it. But I don't see anything getting together, really. Why should it? Until the US has actually got its own house in order. And the most important thing, as I keep saying, the US inflation figures today, US inflation figures throughout the rest of the year, and the FOMC meeting next week, that really will decide how the markets actually react.
We've discussed it briefly before about the accusations of forced labor being used against the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, and the UK Business Department saying that they'll obviously have zero tolerance in accordance with UK rules. But they've now been accused of foot dragging, and that UK firms might be implicated in the use of forced labor. What are your thoughts on this sort of brewing controversy?
I think it is, but if we're going to lecture China about forced labor, I think it'll be a very much of an uphill battle, because it's an autocratic society, and what they will say is we have no business entering into their private, what they term their private and internal affairs, whatever the truth about the Uyghurs actually is, and we suspect we know what that is, don't we? As far as bond markets are concerned, yes, there's a considerable interest in China because of the relatively high interest rates being offered, and in that sense, I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying that money tends to have no smell, so there will be money tracks towards that. But as far as influencing China is concerned, I still maintain that the big lever is if China wants to enter discussions with the rest of the world, because they see themselves outside it, because they don't deal in political cycles, they deal in eras and all those things we've discussed many times before, then its place at the high table needs to be set out. And gradually, they don't want to lose face, we have to deal very carefully with them. And we have an enormous question coming up, which is actually the origin of the pandemic in the first place. Did it in fact come from the Wuhan laboratories? We're going to see the research on that and evidence of that, or in inverted commas, evidence of that emerging over the next month. Now, if it's true that it did, how do we look on China then? We don't want to make China an enemy. We're too interlinked globally with the way that the financial system works. So these are big questions for grown-up politicians to have to answer. So nothing from this weekend, I don't think, nothing in the next few days, nothing in the next few months, maybe towards the end of the year.
Michael, real quickly, want to talk about the taxes and what is going on in Cornwall. Ireland has started to complain. Ireland is complaining now that if you start to reduce taxes to about 15%, when they have deals with about 12.5% on corporate tax, then it's going to affect their revenue stream, as other parts are complaining in the world. Now, in fact, there's a report that came out that said, if we go this way with reducing corporate tax about 15%, and everybody agrees on it, by 2052, maybe corporate tax will be zero, zilch. I mean, what's your take on all this tax conundrum going on?
My take on it is this, that of course, I said this right at the beginning, that there will be lots of economies which depend upon multinational corporations actually being there because they have a relatively low tax regime. As you say, 12.5% in Ireland, 15% minimum apparently to be agreed across the world. I suspect, as I was saying, there's a lot of administrative progress in the United States for this to happen. And if it starts to happen there and the Republicans start nibbling away at these proposals, they've already called it crazy. They've already called it an international cartel. That's what they're actually saying. These are big, strong words that they're actually using about this. As far as islands are concerned, I mean, they could adopt a different kind of business model that doesn't necessarily depend upon low corporate tax to attract corporations there, but there'll be many sympathetic voices to the island of Ireland about this when they start to discuss it. And again, it won't be at this G7; it'll be in the months to come. So you're absolutely right. Once again, you put your finger on it. You know, this is the problem. Biden, Yellen, and the rest of them saying it's not a race to the bottom. Well, it's a difficult race, because to get a pan agreement across the world for the whole of corporate tax rates is very difficult indeed, and a lot of opposition for big countries coming from their own internal politics.
Michael Wilson, thank you very much indeed.
Well, okay, it's time now for an update on the coronavirus pandemic. And Adeswa Moran is here with us. Good morning, Adeswa.
Good morning. Good to see you, OG.
Good to see
Good morning,
you too.
Rufai.
Good morning, OG.
Fantastic.
Good morning, Adeswa.
Good morning.
A great job as always.
Thank you so much. As always, another first for Arise News,
Yes.
exclusive interview with the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Definitely an interview everybody wants to see over and over again. But let's look at the latest statistics that we're really concerned about in COVID-19, and those are the infection rate, the death rate, and of course, vaccination doses globally as well. We do know that vaccination is on the decline. Beg your pardon, the virus infections are on the decline in some parts of the world, but that cannot be said generally. Just yesterday, the Pan American Health Organization said last week alone there were 1.2 million new cases in the Americas, and of course we're seeing countries churning out those numbers. There have been over 174 million cases globally, at least 3.7 million deaths, and 2.2 billion doses of corona vaccines have been administered. Here in Nigeria, we saw 64 new cases recorded in the country. Yobe State, according to the NCDC, posted the most with 18 infections, closely followed by Lagos with 16 new infections. We also saw another backlog this time, according to the agency. They said there had been a bad backlog this time around in Delta State between the 27th of May and the 7th of June. Of course, vaccination continues across Nigeria. The second dose, those who have taken their first dose are encouraged to take a second jab. I, in particular, will be going for my second jab tomorrow for the AstraZeneca vaccine. I'll let you guys know how it goes. And of course, as part of moves to help vaccinate the world, the U.S. will buy 500 million more doses of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine at cost to share through the Global COVAX Alliance for lower income countries. 200 million will be donated this year, the other 300 million doses next year. President Joe Biden is set to make the announcement actually today in a speech before the start of the Group of Seven summit. There's been tons of pressure on the Biden administration to get vaccines to other parts of the world, and this, I dare say, is a big step in that direction. Also, the World Trade Organization members have agreed to start formal talks on boosting global vaccine supplies, though there is still opposition to the idea of waiving patents. In particular, the EU is opposed to this, but EU says it has alternative to waiving patent for vaccine production. We wait to see what exactly would be the outcome of this WTO formal negotiations on boosting vaccine supply across the globe. And finally, this morning, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says he regrets having to take all the flack for holding the Summer Olympics during a pandemic, even as a lot of questions remain unanswered days to the Olympic, the biggest sporting event of the world, of course, under the shadows of a global pandemic. He was speaking in response to comments at a parliamentary session from an opposition lawmaker who said he doesn't see why the Prime Minister should be taking all the flack, really, when the host state's leader is in the shadows. Nobody has heard from him. He's not taking responsibility for vaccinating and the virus infection spread in his state. But Yoshihide Suga says he takes responsibility, and Parliament concluded yesterday that as the Prime Minister, all responsibility actually should be taken by Yoshihide Suga. A state of emergency is still active in 10 of the country's 47 prefectures until June 20. Only medical workers and those 65 and above have been inoculated so far. There are plans to inoculate the general population around the summer till November. And we do know that there are supposed to be snap elections in Japan in October.
Right. Okay.
Well, I wanted to take you on the Tokyo Olympics. I know that you've just mentioned that it's only a few people. I think it's about 11% of the population that has taken at least first of their COVID-19 jab.
Yes.
But there was a question I saw on social media about the GPS tracking system that they were going to, give to visitors who were going to come for the Olympic Games. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because, I mean, a lot of people are saying, yes, it's a great system and all of that, but if visitors were to leave their phones in their hotel rooms, I mean, how would that work? They don't be able to track them.
Yes. But indeed, OG, organizers are saying this GPS tracking system will be used for media and the athletes. And of course, that question has come up. There's also been the argument about invasion of rights. How are you tracking me? And organizers are saying, even if you leave your phone in the hotel, there's a way to retroactively check where you have been and who you've been with. They are saying that there's a bubble they are hoping to put in place where athletes and those who are coming remain in a certain place. No restaurants are visited. You eat in your hotel rooms, your hotel restaurants, yet there's no sightseeing. So they're able to track and minimize people who go about when they arrive the country. Also, you are supposed to have tested at least negative 2 tests before arriving in Japan, and they'll be testing athletes daily. They know that, they say there will be no 14-day mandatory quarantine so that the athletes can at least practice before their event. However, they have to do that within restricted areas. So it's an Olympic like never seen before. There's so many restrictions, but we're also seeing athletes who are happy to go ahead with this.
I mean, everybody has clamored for this Olympic to be cancelled, because when you look at it, the time we had wars, that the Olympic incidentally was hosted in Japan, I think about 1918 or thereabout, the Olympic was cancelled. But in all of this, it sounds like good stuff to me, GPS tracking. But what if I choose to turn off my GPS? Like, I've not turned on my GPS in the last 5-6 months because I want my privacy. And I don't turn on my GPS on my phone, so you can't track me via GPS. What if I do that? What if I get into Japan and I just turn off my GPS? How do you still track me? You can't still go in and track me. So, I mean, I think that method is not really going to work. I mean, they should just forget it. Secondly, and this one, there was a story, I think it just slipped across the cracks in the course of the week. Mutations of COVID-19. I think I saw it in an Israeli newspaper that said the COVID-19 virus mutated about 42 times in a woman that had HIV. And she kept on recovering. She was getting sick. She was recovering. She was getting sick. She was recovering. Because a lot of people have not harped on that story. I think I saw it on Jerusalem Post or something. I mean, that story is, and they're saying that's just to show you the capacity at which the virus can mutate and outmutate itself and keeps going on. And for a 7-month threshold, I think I remembered, she got well. She tested positive for COVID. She tested not positive. She tested well and all that. So the scientists are now saying that what's going to be the lot of people that still carry viruses like HIV virus in themselves and they get COVID at the same time? Because this is something definitely for science to watch. And yeah,
Rufai, we can't say this enough. It's a novel virus, and everything we do is novel. Yes. We are learning by the seconds as they happen. We'll definitely see cases like that. There are also events that are slipping through the cracks across the globe. We'll keep an eye on them. And the world of science is learning very quickly and trying to be a step ahead of this virus in order to beat it. So we'll keep watching. That's all we have. It's hope, it's science, it's responsibility by all, it's collaboration to beat this.
And the ethical community in France is saying this quickly, that Pfizer announced trying to do trials for children below the age of 12, that is unethical. That why are they targeting children now, that they should focus on adults to get the vaccine? Children are not really a threat of COVID. So why are they pushing the envelope even less than the age of 12? I mean, it's caused a big brouhaha in France, and I'm sure other countries still want to look at it.
China has just approved this vaccine for those age 3 and lower. The argument is that, yes, there's a moral question to why some parts of the world are focusing on children who, yes, they are carriers. They could be carriers of this virus, but they recover quickly. They sometimes don't even show symptoms when they get infected. And so the morality of why focus on children, where in other parts of the world you have people who are susceptible to this virus, who could die from this virus, and they don't have even a jab to protect themselves. So yes, there's that question of morality, but if we are to reach herd immunity, we just cannot overlook a certain aspect of the population. That's the argument by science here, that for us to reach herd immunity, we have to look at those age groups as well.
Right. I wanted your thoughts on the U.S. Not only buying vaccine, they're also sharing their excess doses around Africa, especially. I wanted your thoughts on that.
Yes, interesting story, Oji. We cannot say enough that there are not enough vaccines, and where we have these vaccines, we have about 10 countries who have done 75% of all vaccinations. So it is limited. However, where we have them, they are also in few hands. And we've seen vaccine diplomacy. We can't talk about this enough. We've seen vaccine diplomacy. China has been leading the race in that aspect. Even when we had a drought of vaccines from India, China was still sending vaccines to lower income countries. Some people will say the US is trying to play catch up here. But beyond diplomacy, beyond charitable exercises, because this is going to be through the COVAX initiative for lower income countries, these countries also understand the concept of self-protection. We say it all the time, until everywhere and everyone is safe, no one and nowhere is safe. So they understand that, yes, there's vaccine diplomacy. They have to, you know, extend their roots across the globe to show just how powerful they are as countries. That has always been. And this is a new sort of diplomacy we are seeing in the pandemic with vaccine diplomacy. We're seeing charitable exercises, which is good. But again, you're not safe until everybody is safe. And I think that the US understands that very well. And like I said, there's been a lot of pressure on the Biden administration to send out vaccines. In the US, they're also seeing tons of vaccines going to waste. The Johnson & Johnson doses sitting on shelves because Americans are just refusing to take them. And so people are saying, why keep these vaccines when the rest of the world don't have them? How about we take them elsewhere? But this is good.
So they are sharing their Johnson & Johnson, but they're also buying Pfizer as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So beyond just having those vaccines stockpiled and saying, okay, we are vaccinating most of our population now, we can give out the rest. They're beginning to understand that the rest is not enough. We need to do more. And so they are buying more. And I think that's what the US administration is doing.
I mean, and this is the way to go, owing to the fact that America needs to redeem itself. I think Biden, when he got into Europe yesterday, said America is back. Let's not forget that Trump did pull out funding from the World Health Organization at the height of all of this, you know, when coronavirus started, and Trump went one step further, you know, not to supporting other nations. I mean, he did support. He sent out ventilators and the likes, but that was not just enough. And China has taken that soft power because while coronavirus raged on, China kept on pumping the same money it would pump into World Health Organization and the likes, and it kept on putting itself out there, and with its vaccination, like you're saying now. So America feels this is the time to fight that soft war with China once again and put out that soft power out there by giving a lot of people vaccine. Very well said. But I'm excited because the news came out. We've passed our supplementary budget to get some money in to purchase COVID-19 vaccines in the country. So anytime soon we'll be purchasing ours. What is it like? What are we purchasing? What are we buying? We're buying Johnson & Johnson. When is this going to kick into the economy? I'm hearing 30 million or 50 million doses.
I do not have the answer to those questions, Rufai, but I do know that we've had conversations with we've been having bilateral conversations, as we've been told by authorities, health authorities in the country. We're also expecting millions of doses from, of course, the US. You recall that beyond these 500 million doses they're buying, they've already promised to share 80 million doses initially, 20 million of which had been the plans we have seen, and 5 million is coming to Africa. Nigeria should be getting some of those 5 million doses initially. We're also expecting some vaccine from the AVAT, which is the African Union sharing initiative for vaccines. So we should be seeing more vaccines coming into Africa, lower income countries in general.
How about the one BOA paid for?
Sorry?
How about the one BOA paid for? Was that the African Union one?
We haven't heard, and we've not been told anything about that.
Ahead with that, Rufai. So, but then you did say that you are going to take your second dose. I wanted to know if you had been following up on that system and the numbers. Do you know if people are actually going to take their second dose? Are the numbers increasing? Are they reducing? What are your thoughts on that?
Daily, they are increasing. Yesterday, I think we had 2 days ago, actually, we had about 56,000 people go for their second dose jab. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the figures today because I'm trying to get a hold of my Facebook once again. Those information usually were on Twitter, but they've been sent to Facebook. Hopefully, I'll get the full details, the numbers, but people are going to take them. We do know that numbers have increased. There are about at least 400,000 people who have gotten their second dose jab of the AstraZeneca last time I checked.
Well done.
I think I get my jab on Friday.
I get mine tomorrow.
I get mine tomorrow too.
Yay.
So,
thank you so much.
Guys.
Great.
Go get yours, I should say.
Welcome back to the morning show. Let's turn our attention to the G7 now. And world leaders are gathering in the UK for the summit. For US President Joe Biden, it's his first foreign trip since taking office. It's widely been seen as a mission to rebuild the transatlantic ties strained during the Trump era. Biden says his goals are to strengthen the alliance and make it clear to Russia and China that Europe and the United States are closer together than ever. Shortly after his arrival, Biden addressed troops at Air Base, making a rallying cry for democracy, saying the United States was ready to lead an unrivaled network of alliances.
So proud to be here with all of you to kick off my first overseas trip as president. I've been in and out of here many, many times. I've visited well over 100 countries as president or chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, or as vice president or chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. This is my first overseas trip as President of the United States. I'm heading to the G7, then to the NATO ministerial, and then to meet with Mr. Putin to let him know what I want him to know. That the United States is back and democracies of the world are standing together to tackle the toughest challenges and the issues that matter most to our future. That we're committed to leading with strength, defending our values, and delivering for our people.
Well, let's bring in Philip Crowder, who is in Cornwall for us, where the G7 summit will be taking place. Philip, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. How is Cornwall? And quickly, let me, for the benefit of our viewers, ask you to help summarize for us the key issues at this particular G7 summit being hosted by the United Kingdom for the 7th time.
Yeah, good to be with you. The main topic, of course, here is the overarching one for us all and for the whole world, and that is the coronavirus pandemic. It is the first summit, after all, the first G7 summit that is taking place in person since 2019. That was in Biarritz in France. Since then, there's been one virtual one. First time for many of these world leaders that they get to see each other face to face. A lot has changed, of course, since the last one, since the pandemic began as well. There are new leaders here on the world stage, the likes of US President Joe Biden, of course, his first trip abroad, but then also the representatives from the European Union. This is their first in-person meeting with the members of the G7 and many of their international counterparts. Now, when it comes to concrete announcements here, there is one, I think, that everybody here wants, and that is a clear commitment to vaccine distribution around the world. Already we are going to hear details today from the White House on their plan to buy 500 million vaccines of the Pfizer version and to distribute those to poorer countries and to the African Union, who will, of course, then distribute those throughout Africa, it is hoped. So chances are that we will be getting a more comprehensive vaccination distribution system here announced by the members of the G7 countries. Not the only topic here at hand, one that Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the host, of course, of this G7 summit, wants to talk about quite a bit is climate change. The next climate conference will be taking place in the UK as well. And of course, on that subject matter, very important, is the return of Joe Biden onto the world stage, who of course has announced the return of the United States into the Paris Climate Accord, and who will want to very clearly symbolize here that the United States, when it comes to combating climate change, are very much back at the table.
As you've said, there's been that generous pledge by the US to donate 500 million vaccines. UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said he would like to see the whole world vaccinated by the end of 2022, but hasn't given any detail on how that will happen. Do you think that the UK will also follow suit with a pledge of their own?
Yeah, I think there's the pressure now, of course, the pressure that was introduced, if you will, by Joe Biden making that announcement from the White House's side that other members of the G7 countries are now expected to do the same. The European Union is expected to do something similar. Of course, it doesn't have that enormous surplus of vaccines that the United States now has. In fact, the US was under quite a bit of pressure from around the world to use those surplus vaccines as quickly as possible, because while in the United States fewer people are getting vaccinated, because a large percentage of the population, of course, is already. There is enormous demand, as we all know, in many, many countries around the world, and a lot of the time in less developed countries around the world. And that is where there is this worldwide hope, I think, for there to be a very clear strategy announced here. And yes, the United Kingdom is expected to make a concrete announcement here as well, because as you just mentioned, it was a goal of the host, of Prime Minister Boris Johnson, to get the whole world vaccinated by the end of next year. Might be a lofty goal, might also be a realistic one, depending on what exactly we hear here at the G7 summit in Cornwall.
Summit, President Biden will be one of the newest members, but he will also be the oldest member around the table. And when I raised the point about the issues, President Biden, before leaving for the UK, had referred to Russia and China, that at this summit, the US and Europe will show Russia and China that they're together and that the G7 is strong. How significant is this for President Biden and the United States?
Yeah, well, the US president has a relatively clear overarching goal here. First of all, of course, combating the coronavirus pandemic, but his end goal, if you will, literally at the end of this week that he will be spending in Europe, will be to have shown during this whole week of summits, not just the G7 summit here in Cornwall, but also the upcoming NATO summit in Brussels, then the EU-US summit also in Brussels. All of those events are supposed to show the return of the United States on the world stage, its return to traditional alliances like NATO, who of course had been criticized by Biden's predecessor Donald Trump. NATO, the European Union, G7, the United States wants to make clear that it wants to work within those alliances and that it wants to build up a new alliance of democracies to face the likes of China and Russia. He wants the message from the United States to be clear that there is a united Western front, one supposes, against the likes of Russia and China. And of course, remember that this week will culminate in the meeting, the face-to-face meeting between Presidents Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin of Russia. It is supposed to, during this week, show an increasing commitment from the United States to those world alliances that will maybe push Vladimir Putin into a little bit of a corner, noticing that the United States is very much a member of those alliances once again.
Is there any chance that Boris Johnson might use this opportunity to sort of restate his commitment to that 0.7% of the national income being spent on foreign aid?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting summit for British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. I didn't exactly hear your question, but let me tell a little bit about what his goals here are. Of course, when you are the host of a G7 summit, what you want to do, first of all, is show off your country in a way. That's why we're here in Cornwall. It doesn't look exactly sunny behind me, but it will be during the G7 summit, I promise. And of course, he wants to show the best of the United Kingdom, a country that, of course, maybe isn't the most popular one diplomatically right now, certainly in the European Union because of Brexit and an agreement that is not being entirely followed by the United Kingdom right now, an exit protocol, essentially, that will be discussed here at the G7 summit as well. And I mentioned already earlier that what the Prime Minister wants to work toward is a firmer commitment from all of these countries getting together here. And that, by the way, includes some who have been invited, the likes of Australia, India and South Korea, for example. Their heads of state and government will be here as well. And that is to show, first of all, that there are more members of these alliances being built, but also that those countries might be getting a little bit more involved in the fight against climate change. Again, a reminder that the next climate summit will be taking place in Glasgow in the United Kingdom, and that is where, again, Prime Minister Boris Johnson wants to impress as much as possible.
Well, thank you very much, Philip. Let's hope that this summit will be much better than what happened in Biarritz in 2019, and that there will be a unity of purpose on all the issues. Thank you very much indeed.